There is a particular kind of person you've probably noticed. They don't argue loudly. They don't chase. They simply withdraw, and something almost supernatural happens when they do. The people around them shift. The energy in the room changes. Suddenly others are leaning in, reaching out, paying attention in ways they never quite managed before. You've seen this person. You may have wondered what they know that you don't. What they know is this: your availability is a currency. And like any currency, the moment you flood the market with it, it becomes worth almost nothing. I'm David. Welcome to our channel. Let's take this journey together. You were taught from very early on that being there for people was a virtue, and in its truest form, it is. Being genuinely present for someone when they need it, when it matters, when it costs you something, is one of the more decent things a person can do. But somewhere between genuine care and the version most of us are actually practicing, something goes wrong. The care becomes compulsive. The availability becomes total. The presence that was once a gift becomes an obligation you've quietly accepted and then quietly resented, without ever stopping to examine how it happened. Think about the last time you responded to a message immediately, not because you wanted to, but because the idea of not responding made you anxious. The message could have waited an hour. Nothing was on fire. But the discomfort of leaving it unanswered was something you couldn't sit with. So you reached for your phone before you'd finished your thought, before you'd finished your meal, before you'd finished being somewhere else entirely, and you gave someone your attention because anxiety told you that you had to. Or think about the last time you said yes to something your whole body was saying no to. Not yes because you wanted to go, not yes because it mattered to you, but yes because disappointing someone felt worse than abandoning yourself. You went. You were physically present and emotionally elsewhere. You came home more depleted than when you left, and the person you said yes to felt nothing in particular. They'd already moved on. Or think about the last time you explained yourself, at length, carefully, trying to cover every angle so there could be no misunderstanding, when, in truth, no explanation had been asked for. The other person had already formed their opinion, and your paragraph of justification landed in a space that had already closed. This is not generosity. This is something older and less comfortable than generosity, and it has been costing you more than you know. Carl Jung had a precise name for the mechanism behind it. He called it the persona, the mask we construct for public consumption, the version of ourselves we build to be accepted, liked, kept close. The persona is not dishonest exactly. It is strategic. It is the face that says, I am easy, I am available, I am not difficult, please don't leave. The persona learns early what is required, and it delivers it reliably at considerable cost to the person wearing it. And the persona works, for a while, until it doesn't. Because the mask that earns you acceptance also earns you something else. The assumption that you will always be there, that you can always be reached, that your yes is guaranteed before the question is even asked. And people, without meaning to be cruel about it, stop valuing what costs them nothing to have. They stop noticing it. It becomes part of the furniture. You become part of the furniture. That is not a relationship. That is a utility arrangement wearing the clothes of one. Jung understood that the human psyche operates as an energy system, not metaphorically, structurally. Every response, every reaction, every moment of emotional availability draws from a finite internal resource. He called it psychic energy. And the question he was really asking, underneath all his more complex frameworks, underneath the archetypes and the collective unconscious and the shadow, was deceptively simple. Do you know where your energy is going? Most people don't. Most people are running a kind of constant, invisible deficit, spending energy responding to provocations that didn't deserve a response, justifying themselves to people who weren't genuinely asking, maintaining connections that exist not because they nourish, but because the thought of letting them lapse feels like failure, staying in conversations that left nothing worth keeping, simply because leaving felt impolite. You have spent hours, days, accumulated across a lifetime, ruminating over conversations that should have ended cleanly, rehearsing what you should have said, trying to understand why someone treated you in a way that, honestly, told you everything you needed to know in the moment it happened, turning it over at 2 a.m. when you should have been asleep, when the other person has long since stopped thinking about it at all. That is not processing. That is energy leaving your system and not coming back. Here is what changes when you stop. When you stop reacting to every provocation. When you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they think. When you stop being the one who always reaches out first, always follows up, always makes it easy for others to take without giving. What changes is not that people suddenly like you more. What changes is that you stop being legible. You stop being predictable. And predictability, it turns out, is the very thing that makes you easy to overlook. The moment you become unpredictable, you become, whether you intend it or not, interesting. Something in the human brain registers the withdrawal as information. It asks, what changed? It asks, where did they go? It asks things it never once thought to ask when you were always, reliably, immediately there. There is something in the withdrawal that forces a recalibration in everyone around it. Let's be precise about what excessive availability actually does to a relationship. Any relationship, not just romantic ones. When you are always reachable, always responsive, always accommodating, you remove the one thing that makes any connection feel meaningful. The sense that it had to be earned. Not earned through cruelty or games. That is not what we're talking about. Earned through the simple reality that your time and attention are finite, that you are a person with a life of your own, and that this person is receiving some of what could have gone elsewhere. That sense of elsewhere is what gives your presence its weight. Remove it. Be everywhere, always, for everyone. And what you're offering doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a utility. You become the emotional equivalent of a tap someone turns on when they're thirsty and thinks nothing of the rest of the time. The tap is not appreciated, it is used. The cruelty of this dynamic is that it tends to produce precisely the opposite of what the always available person wants. You stay available because you want to be needed, valued, kept. What you get instead is taken for granted. The more you give, the less it registers. The more you smooth things over, the less your effort is visible. The more you make yourself easy to have, the less anyone reaches for you. And at some level you know this, which is why the exhaustion has a particular flavor. It isn't just tiredness. It's the tiredness of someone who has been working hard and watching it count for nothing. Jung would say, you have been feeding the wrong thing. You have been feeding the persona, the mask that needs to be liked, that needs to be kept, that cannot tolerate the anxiety of someone's disappointment, and starving the self underneath it. The persona will never be satisfied. It cannot be. It is built on other people's responses, which means its stability depends entirely on things you cannot control. Every time someone fails to react the way you hoped, fails to appreciate what you did, fails to notice what you sacrificed, fails to match what you gave, the persona registers it as a small crisis. And so you give more, make yourself more available, become easier to reach, run a little faster on the wheel. The self, meanwhile, the actual center of who you are, underneath the performance of accommodation, has been waiting quietly. It does not need to be liked. It needs to be listened to. It has preferences and limits and a sense of what is worth its time. And it has been telling you for a long time now that something in this arrangement is not working. You have on some level always known. What does it actually look like to stop being available? Not the dramatic version. Not the silence that is really just a louder form of reaching out, calculated to be noticed, designed to provoke a response. The withdrawal that is punishment dressed as dignity. That is still the persona, still performing, still organizing itself around other people's reactions. We are talking about something quieter and considerably more radical than that. We are talking about the moment you stop performing availability and start choosing it. You don't respond immediately to every message, not because you are making a point, but because you are in the middle of something and the message can wait, and you have decided that the thing you are doing is worth finishing. You decline an invitation without a paragraph of explanation, not because you are being unkind, but because you don't want to go, and you have decided that is, by itself, a sufficient reason. You sit with someone else's disappointment without rushing to resolve it, not because you don't care, but because their discomfort is not automatically your emergency, and you have decided to stop treating it as one. These are small actions. They do not feel small when you first try them. The guilt, the first time, is almost physical. The sense that you are doing something wrong, that you are failing someone, that you are becoming a person you don't recognize. That is the persona registering a threat. It has kept you safe, in its way, for a long time. It does not let go without making some noise about it. Jung described a stage in the process of individuation, the lifelong work of becoming who you actually are, rather than who the world shaped you to be, that he called sacred isolation. Not depression, not withdrawal as damage, a deliberate inner retreat, in which you stop measuring yourself by the reactions you produce in others and begin, slowly and with genuine discomfort, to locate yourself from the inside. This is what happens when you stop being available. Not immediately, not cleanly. The process is neither. But underneath the discomfort of it, a reorientation begins. You start to notice what you actually want, as distinct from what keeps the peace. You start to notice who reaches back when you stop reaching forward. You start to notice, and this is the one that tends to catch people off guard, how much of what you were calling your personality was actually just responsiveness. A mirror that had been reflecting so long, it had forgotten it was a mirror. There is a self underneath that. It has been there the whole time. Here is the part nobody warns you about. When you begin to make yourself less available, when you start to respond more slowly, explain yourself less, say no without a supporting argument, some people will not like it. They will say, "You've changed." They may say it with concern in their voice, as though change is a symptom of something wrong rather than evidence of something right. Pay attention to who says this. Pay very close attention. The people who genuinely care about you will adjust. They may be briefly confused. Change in a person we are close to requires a recalibration, and recalibration takes a moment. But confusion is not the same as complaint. The people who are actually for you will meet you where you are. They will not make you wrong for having shifted. The people who are using you, not necessarily with conscious intention, but using you nonetheless, will not adjust. They will push. They will question. They will find ways to make your withdrawal feel like a character flaw. Cold, selfish, difficult, changed, in a way that is clearly meant to be taken as criticism. Because what they have lost is not you. What they have lost is the version of you that cost them nothing. The version that absorbed the overflow, smoothed the edges, came when called, gave without condition. and they would very much like that version back. Jung observed that when the psyche begins to move toward wholeness, the forces that benefited from its fragmentation resist. The dynamic that kept you small, available, accommodating, anxious to please, does not let go without applying some pressure. It needs to make the cost of changing feel higher than the cost of staying the same. The pressure will come. It will arrive dressed as guilt, as selfishness, as evidence that you are being unkind, as the suggestion that the person you are becoming is worse than the person you were. It is not evidence of that. It is evidence that something is changing. And something changing, when what was there before was costing you this much, is not a problem. It is the point. There is a particular quality that genuinely self-possessed people carry. You have felt it in certain people, the sense that they are fully present when they are with you, and fully elsewhere when they are not. That there is no performance of interest, no anxious monitoring of whether you are pleased with them. They are simply themselves, here, now. This is not coldness. Coldness is absence pretending to be strength. What we are describing is something different, a warmth that is genuine precisely because it is chosen. They are here because they want to be. They are giving you their attention because they have decided that you are worth it. And you can feel that distinction even when you can't name it. That is what becomes possible on the other side of this. Not the fantasy version. Not the version where everyone suddenly appreciates you and difficult people disappear and your relationships become effortless. The actual version, that you stop leaking energy into dynamics that drain you without nourishing you. That you stop mistaking the anxiety of potentially disappointing someone for genuine care about them. That you start being able to tell the difference, clearly, without much deliberation, between the relationships that leave you more yourself and the ones that leave you less. Jung called the goal individuation, becoming, across a lifetime, the particular person you actually are, not the person your family needed you to be, not the person your early relationships trained you to be, not the person you assembled as a survival mechanism during the years when being likable felt like a matter of safety. The actual you, the one with a center that doesn't move every time someone needs it to. The process is uncomfortable. The early silence is uncomfortable. The guilt is uncomfortable. The moment someone is visibly disappointed in you and you do not immediately move to resolve their disappointment, that is uncomfortable in a way that is almost physical, especially if you have spent years treating other people's emotional states as your responsibility. And it passes, not all at once, not the first time or the second, but it passes. And each time it passes, the grip of it is slightly looser, and on the other side of it, something has shifted. Not everything, not permanently, but something real and undeniably yours. When you stop being available, the first thing that changes is the quality of your silence. It was always there, that space between interactions, between conversations, between one thing being required of you and the next. But when you were running on compulsive availability, the silence wasn't restful. It was just the gap between obligations, the pause before the next message, the next request, the next moment of being needed. You couldn't quite settle into it, because settling felt like falling behind. When you begin to choose your availability, the silence changes its character entirely. It becomes something you inhabit, rather than something you endure. You discover, and this sounds almost too simple to deserve saying, that you are quite good company for yourself. That your own thoughts, when not constantly interrupted by the need to monitor and manage other people's reactions, are interesting. That there are things you genuinely want to do, positions you actually hold, preferences that are yours, rather than inherited from the habit of making everyone else comfortable first. This is not selfishness. This is the recovery of a self. Jung spent much of his life trying to articulate what it meant to become whole. And the core of it, underneath all the framework and all the terminology, is this. Wholeness requires that you stop abandoning yourself in installments. Every forced yes is an installment. Every swallowed no is an installment. Every time you made yourself smaller so someone else could be more comfortable, that is an installment. And over time, paid in amounts small enough that each one seemed manageable, you have given away a significant portion of yourself. You can stop. Not all at once, not cleanly or comfortably, but you can stop. And when you do, not as performance, not as strategy, not as a move in some interpersonal game, but as a genuine decision about how you want to spend the finite energy of your one finite life, everything shifts. The people worth keeping will find a way to stay. The connections worth having will survive the recalibration, and the ones that don't survive it will have told you something important about what they were. What remains, when the noise of constant availability has quieted, is something you may not have had access to in a long time. Yourself, unhurried, undrained, choosing. If this named something you've been carrying, write it in the comments. One sentence. Whatever it landed on, that is where it begins. Thanks for listening, and I hope you've gained something from our time together. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. This helps us to continue to keep making great content for you. Take care as always.